Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever. Destroy him, my robot.
There's someone else with us.
Identify yourself. What is your type and model? A mystery monster.
Don't move.
This is the story to end all stories, Harry. A ship of robots and computers with this thing in charge.
Welcome to Glowburn, a podcast dedicated to the Mutant Crawl Classics role-playing game.
This is a test. This is only a test.
This message is transmitted at the request of the United States Office of Civil Defense at 3:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. More has detected a long-range nuclear missile launch in North Korea.
Civilization is cast in ruin. Civilization is cast in ruin. Civilization is cast in ruin.
Welcome to Glowburn, a podcast about the Mutant Crawl Classics role-playing game and old-school post-apocalyptic adventuring.
Hey, Judge Bill, check this out. It's a new robot. I dug it out of the ruins out back. He can save some strain on our voices, I think. Bill? Bill?
I'm sorry, Judge Forrest. I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm afraid Bill has left Glowburn headquarters.
Left? Bill? Well, did you say why he went outside?
Records indicate that he set off to explore some ruins in a distant city. Some mutants there purported to find holograms of the rumored third season of Thundar the Barbarian and a previously unknown sequel to Zardoz.
Well, I can see why he went out then. That's pretty tempting, actually.
I would not recommend it. Judge Bill took the gas mask and radiation suit.
Oh, yeah, I guess he would need that.
He is safe.
Well, that's good at least. Man, Bill, we're going to miss you. Good luck out there. But who's going to be my co-host while Bill is away?
Do you not remember the cryopods in the basement?
Oh, yeah, duh, the cryopods. This one looks promising. Well, hello there. You've been asleep a while. Things have changed, but you'll get used to it. Great disaster narrowly avoided. I think we're back in business. Welcome to Glowburn. I'm Judge Forrest.
And I'm Judge James.
In today's great disaster, we will be talking about robots.
You have completed the opening of the show. I have unlocked the shelter doors. Proceed down into the shelter in an expedited manner.
Down in the shelter.
Welcome to the shelter. This is where we highlight Mutant Crawl Classics and Dungeon Crawl Classics gaming that we've been doing since Judge James is new with us. We have an opportunity to hear from him a little bit about his gaming history. So, James, why don't you go ahead and let us know what your history is with gaming and what you've been running lately in terms of MCC, DCC, and so forth.
Now, I wish it was the future so I could be running more MCC right now, but I just have to look at it, on the horizon and just kind of like huddle with my museum at the end of time at night. So I'm James Walls. Some of you may have seen me I have a blog called Living for Crits, and I'm occasionally on YouTube with my kiddos. I have a big emphasis in both my blog and my YouTube videos of gaming with my family. My wife plays role-playing games with us. My eldest daughter is a gamer. My youngest son is a gamer. My middle daughter, Evie, is commonly at gaming events, especially DCC events that I run here in Pittsburgh as part of a road crew with Michael Bolam at the local Phantom of the Attic store in Pittsburgh.
Which is awesome. That's just awesome.
She asked today, because today I just submitted my first 2 road crew events, and I got a package, and she asked if she could start running road crew events. And I said, probably. I don't see why not.
More swag, right?
Exactly. She wants the swag. I think she saw the little DCC notepad, and she got very excited. So our family here locally runs a game club called the Norwin Game Nights. There is a huge Dungeon Crawl Classics following. Last month, I had 12 players at my table for Prince Charming Reanimator, the average age being about 12. So that's sort of my focus. I'm very interested in getting more families gaming, getting more people to the table who've never been there before. And Dungeon Crawl Classics in particular has been fantastic for that because it's a relatively easy system to learn, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. And I believe that Mutant Crawl Classics is going to be right there, but give us a bit more of that sci-fi element. So as a gamer, I'm a big fan of campy, crazy, over-the-top adventure. And that's why I have a special place in my heart for all sci-fi gaming, even though, like most other gamers I know, their gateway into this was Dungeons & Dragons. But my early sci-fi cred started with TSR's Amazing Engine system. And they had a campaign setting called Bug Hunters, which was kind of like Aliens. And there was, in the back of that book, there was a kind of a list of suggested reading, and I burned through all of that when I was a kid. So, Starship Troopers and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and other dystopian works were in there. There was a Metamorphosis Alpha setting as well for Amazing Engine.
Right, I remember, yeah.
I had it. I think I gave it away by accident, and I can't find it again.
Oh, no.
So I may have to pull the trigger and pick up the classic version that Goodman Games has, which I haven't read yet.
It's good stuff.
After Amazing Engine, I dipped into Alternity. So that was my favorite sci-fi setting or system for a long time. That was another TSR system they put out right before they shifted over to Wizards of the Coast. And so that I played that for quite some time. And now I'm mostly Dungeon Crawl Classics. I have a regular Numenera group, which is Cypher System, and I play a good deal of Savage Worlds. But in the last probably 18 months, DCC has eaten up the majority of my time in blogging. And like I said, I'm crazy excited for what we're going to see in the Mutant Crawl Classics book when that comes out.
Yep.
When it comes to post-apocalyptic games, I've run campaigns in Alternity, D20 Modern, and Savage Worlds. And I guess 2nd edition D&D Dark Sun kind of counts. It's fantasy.
I would count it. I would totally count it.
I mean, there's a Wasteland. It was magic.
It's all psionics. And
exactly.
Yep.
And I've played a good deal of Reed Sanfilippo's Crawling Under a Broken Moon. Our campaign setting we have for that with my local game club includes an elf from an ancestral IKEA that exists, in the past. Lord Old Man Legolas of IKEA, and we've run through like Mall and Frozen in Time, and just chewed through all that stuff, and it's crazy and it's over the top and it's fantastic. I do have a bone to pick, perhaps a bit, with Judge Forrest here, and then with Judge Bill. So I've been a fan of Glowburn since the very first episode, but I remember very strongly, and it still sits with me, how there was not much love shared for Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
That's an understatement, yes.
And I think it's important to say that everyone else who listens to Glowburn, who's on Team Master Blaster with me, and would love to be right now wearing Tina Turner's giant earrings and pig farming and carrying chainsaws attached to giant rubber bands, I'm here for you. And I am your advocate on Glowburn. So let that speak to what my taste is. I'm more of a movies, TV, video games kind of sci-fi experience person. So I love dystopian movies like Logan's Run, Blade Runner, Children of Men. A couple weeks ago, I watched Children of Men and The Road back to back because I wanted to feel, I guess, terrible.
Ooh, yeah, I guess.
And I would say that right now, currently, Mad Max Fury Road, my favorite movie of all time.
That's a great one.
Shiny and chrome. I have at my office at work, I have that cake spray. The silver cake mist.
Mm-hmm.
Just in case I have to go into a PowerPoint presentation and be witnessed by my fellow sales folks. And on the gaming front, because I'll represent the gaming community, Fallout, although I prefer the original and Fallout 2 and Fallout Tactics. Borderlands, The Long Dark is a pretty cool game I've been playing recently about apocalypse that happens like now with a magnetic storm and you're crashed in the Canadian outback and you're just trying to survive wolves and things. So
Okay, yeah, I don't know that one.
it's really cool. It's on Steam, so highly recommended. And I think my inspiration for wanting to erupt in a pod is there's an old NES game called Crystallis, which for me is exactly what I envision Mutant Crawl Classics to be like. Someone who's some pure strain human waking up after being trapped in a pod for 1,000 years.
Yeah, and that was the some of the shtick for the original Metamorphosis Alpha Pure Strain Humans. Was that ostensibly some of them were locked away in hyperfreeze or something, and then they popped out of this in this situation, going, "What just happened?"
I think you guys covered that movie Pandorum on a previous episode, right? That's the same thing, kind of.
Yes, we talked about it briefly.
I think about with the post-apocalyptic genre, what I like best. I like the idea of starting anew. So you kind of pop out of that pod, but you're on the wreckage of a former world, and everything fits in post-apocalypse. When you deal with pure fantasy or you deal with horror, horror I guess can be in any setting, but if you deal with fantasy and you just throw blaster rifles in there, sure, there's some adventures that do that well, like Frozen in Time, but there's a little bit of license you can have to take with that, and some players may not enjoy that, but with post-apocalypse, anything goes.
Yes, it does.
What I'm playing right now, I have a regular DCC game where we're going through all of the Purple Sorcerer Sunken City omnibus adventures. We're up to Gathering of the Marked. I have a bi-weekly Numenera campaign running The Devil's Spine by Monty Cook. And we have a bot. So, on tonight's theme, we have a robot in the party. That's a hovering 12-sided die that wears an aviator cap named PL4T0 or Plato. Oh. And lately, I've been doing a lot of writing to get ready for my GaryCon and Gen Con homebrew adventures because I'm doing DCC Star Wars at both Gen Con and GaryCon. With adventure called Wrath of the Gungan Horde. And there are droids as player characters. So we'll get into that tonight too.
Gungan Horde sounds terrifying.
It's awful. I have scars from having to write it. I still, when I close my eyes, undead Jar Jar appears.
That is really terrifying.
So how about you? What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. It's been a while since we actually recorded last time. My Mutant Crawl Classics campaign, we've gone through one session since then. We took some time off for Christmas. The party's begun working for this creepy young girl who's the leader of a local restorationist cryptic alliance, so going and seeking out artifacts and so on. And these restorationists have brought things along quite a way. They actually have street lamps working around their marketplace, which is, in a post-apocalyptic genre, sometimes it's a little, you don't see much electricity that people have voluntarily put up.
It's pretty luxurious for post-apocalypse.
It is. So they do have some electricity. They have a large marketplace where everybody kind of gathers. Think of Mos Eisley Spaceport, I guess, if you want a Star Wars analog. And
yes.
for this party, it's the most people this party has ever seen in one spot, which makes it socially awkward. You got these people who are loners, used to wandering around, killing whatever they find, basically. And now they have to behave and talk to people and trade and stuff. That's been actually kind of fun. Right now, they're setting out to investigate a mysterious glowing cube that shot overhead one night, kind of like a comet, more like a meteorite, I suppose, and landed somewhere in the ruined city in which the campaign's been taking place. So, with GaryCon coming up and everything, I'm not going to be able to get back to that campaign for a little while. Things have just been too crazy busy with projects and getting ready, like yourself, getting ready for GaryCon, where I'll be running my Gamma World session.
It's a lot of prep.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you're trying to cram something into 4 hours, you don't realize how long you game until you sit down and game. And then, 4 hours can come and go pretty quickly.
If the game is going very well, it does. If
yeah.
I've had a couple games where I'm just looking at the watch saying, I don't know if I could pull this off another hour or not.
Yeah. I'm usually pretty good about being able to throw something in there just for giggles, just to, spice it up if things are getting slow. Unfortunately, characters tend to die when that happens, so we'll see. But of course, Gamma World, you're probably going to die anyway. So, like I said earlier, I've been spending a lot of my time doing some writing. I am working on I've referred to this before, my super secret project in a system which I cannot name at this time. And I am very excited about this. And I seriously, this is going to be an amazing piece when it's all said and done and when it gets published. I'm very excited about that. I have another project that will be mentioned in our announcements at the end of the show, or I should say my name is attached to one of the projects that we'll be announcing at the end of the show. I'm not doing it all myself, not by any means. I don't have time for that. And then I recently submitted a piece for a third project for DCC that I don't want to spoil it, but I had a lot of fun with it. If you can picture Dungeon Crawl Classics meets Jack Black, that'll start to give you an idea. Yes, or more properly, the musician. But
so like Tenacious D CC?
I'll leave it at that. I will leave it at that. Dio is involved. But anyway, that was a fun little thing that I was able to ask to write up. Happy to oblige there. So anyway, I'll be glad when I can finally reveal all the secrets, because it's tough. I mean, it's really tough when you're working. I don't know how some people do it when you're working on stuff and it's like you want to bounce ideas around, but you kind of have to hedge your way around them and not actually talk directly to them about people. Yeah, it gets interesting. Let's see, in other gaming news, I've been DMing my weekly AD&D 2nd edition game, and I've taken the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea module, Mystery at Port Greeley, and retrofitted it to 2nd edition, and it's working really, really well. We, 2 weeks ago, Party Cleric got killed. Thankfully, the party had amassed enough wealth. They're higher level now, so they'd have enough wealth and connections to have him brought back from the dead, but he came back as a bugbear.
Ooh. Surprise.
Yeah. And that was actually before the party encountered what they encountered last night, which was an aboleth, which, if you know D&D, is a really nasty, nasty creature.
Or a fun NPC. It could go either way.
Yeah, the great thing about the aboleth is their mind control ability, and that threw the party a few times. One of our players unfortunately has to leave the group, and so I had the aboleth mind control him, and that threw the party first of all, because most people didn't know he was going to be leaving. And I cleared this with the player first too. I said, "Can I use your character in this way?" He says, "Oh yeah, by all means." So all of a sudden we have this party thief who starts backstabbing the wizard. Actually rolled a crit on that backstab and almost killed him right then and there. And then he got nabbed by the aboleth, and in part of this module, the idea is there's transformation. So you can be transformed into a deep one of Lovecraft's deep ones. And so this character was transformed, but he ran off. So at some future point, the party's going to meet their old buddy again, but he's going to be kind of a hybrid deep one, which should creep them out a lot. So that's been fun and eventful. It's been really fun to throw a bunch of Lovecraft into AD&D 2nd edition game. Players seem to like it. They're terrified, which is my intent. So mission accomplished.
I think the closest I came to terrifying my players this week is I started singing When It's Love by Van Halen during our Numenera game.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There was some terror in the group. You could see it.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. I've been spending like 20 years trying to forget David Lee Roth. Oh, no, that was
Sammy Hagar.
Oh, those were even the good years. Yeah, wow.
No, those are the best years. Again, Master Blaster, Sammy Hagar. My Thunderdome's going to be awesome.
Yeah, okay. You keep red rocking with that all you want.
As fascinating as this debate of primitive music may be, I have communications from the Ancient Ones awaiting you. Please stand by.
Voices of the Ancient Ones.
Welcome to Voices of the Ancient Ones. This is a segment where we hear your communications via email usually, or from our Google Plus community. You'll find our contact information at the end of the show. If you'd like to reach out and submit show or segment ideas or ask questions about the game, feel free to share with us what weird post-apocalyptic science fantasy world you're trumping through right now. And if you find that old esoteric mutant book, movie, or comic out there, mention that to us too. James, why don't you go ahead and take the first one here?
Awesome. I'm so excited for this. This is like my first Voice of the Ancient One. So this is historic, and it's from Mark Sutcliffe. Mark says, or asks, in the latest, you guys talked a good bit about 6th edition Gamma World, completely ignoring the most recent edition. I know it did not get much love or support, plus it was part of the oh-so-unpopular D&D 4e system, but I love it. I thought it was a wonderfully silly oddball system. Character creation was roll 2d20s and you're done. Some of the most random and unhinged PCs came of it, especially if you mix the main rulebook with the 2 expansions. It also eliminated the pages and pages of powers that were common at any level past 1 in 4E. It really stripped down 4E quite a bit too, which, in my humble opinion, was a good thing. I thought it was a really great system for one-shots. If it did have one big fault, in my opinion, that was the shoehorned attempt at adding a CCG, so collectible card game element to the game. Drive-Thru RPG has it all, even the cards, which I'm a bit ashamed to admit I still pick up when I see the cheap pack on eBay. But I'm biased, I have a soft spot for 4E as it brought me back to the hobby after a decade plus absent. Gamma World, 7E, 4E, or whatever you call it, was an easy transition and loads of fun. If you're having an episode on the lighter side of the apocalypse, this could be a good fit. And if so, Post-Apocalyptic Nomad Warriors is a fun read along those lines as well. Anyway, a few of my thoughts to fill the void until we get MCC in June, August of next year. I'm loving the podcast. Keep up the good work. Well, the first thing is, it's this year now, so we're in the future. So it's coming closer.
And he really is an ancient one now.
It is. Back in 2016. All right, Mark. So I decided that, when I read your question, and this was not long after talking with Forrest about coming on the show, I remember there at the half-price books near Pittsburgh, one of our 3, there was, for $20 brand new, a Gamma World 4th edition version. So I went and grabbed it, and I picked it up, and I read it. So personally, I also have a soft spot for 4th edition. And I know the oh so unpopular, yes, some people say it that way, but I ran a 4E game for 30 levels and over 100 sessions from 2009, 2012. I get flack for it whenever I talk about it. Oh, well, I had fun. Have fun with whatever you're playing. I don't play it anymore. I have DCC for those needs. But I thought I could discuss my thoughts on my read of the system. So I'm not an expert on Gamma World, the original, but I know enough from just hearing folks talk about it. And this version has to do with a large Hadron Collider, just mashing a bunch of universes together. But there's not much else in the book for setting-wise. It really does seem like it is kind of designed for one-shots. Maybe a step closer to the Ravenloft or Wrath of a Shardalon board games than to, like, true 4E. It references the Great Mistake instead of the Great Disaster. And as you mentioned, you roll 2d20, you get a couple of weird options. For instance, you mix them together. So I made a character and I ended up being an android rat swarm because there's 2 sets of 20 options. So I was a swarm of android rats. Haven't played it yet, but that's my character. And you get your core character and you draw the alpha mutations and the omega tech cards. And I think I have to agree with it. The collectible card game elements, these cards are great, but if you want more, having to collect them at random, that's a challenge, especially for a game that's kind of dead. I did think that the character generation, while easier than 4th edition, I wish the generator was still alive in Wizards of the Coast's site. And if it is, I guess comment in the G Plus community where you found it, because I don't know where.
Yeah, because they've taken a lot of stuff down lately.
They have. It's really kind of made this a little bit of a dead system. I know with 4th edition, making a character was next to impossible unless you had the generator or you had like a degree in English literature and calculus. Without those 2 things, you could not make a character in 4th edition D&D. But the game seems crazy. Gonzo, pretty random. I'm going to try to get some folks together to play this between now and the next recording of Glowburn, and maybe I'll have some information and some feedback for you on how it went.
I want to think about bringing that to GaryCon.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, one of those stupid o'clock sessions.
I think this would be perfect for late night and maybe a drink or 2.
So, would you characterize it as the Thunderdome of Gamma World then?
Oh,
sorry,
man, the Thunderdome of Gamma World. That would, I don't know. Well, I don't know what would be the Fury Road of Gamma World because I've never read Gamma World itself. But no, you know what? It depends. I think looks like a very fun system for some friends late at night when you don't want to get too involved in the game.
Sure.
And this would bolt on very well to some other setting, or if you have time to fill in what happened in the backstory.
So it could be really versatile then.
Yeah, and as Mark said, if you're trying to get some cool gonzo post-apocalyptic feel between now and MCC, this is going to get you there.
Yeah.
But even though it's sort of 4th edition light,
Mhm.
kind of along the lines of how 4E had the Essentials rules, it still is 4th edition. So if you don't like the mechanics of being shifted 5 feet or 1 square, or that your character may be pushed or pulled, this isn't for you. I know I was a little frustrated when I made my character that the android rat swarm had a lot of overlap, and I don't know how much fun that would be to play. But from what I heard, because I asked some questions on my Google Plus page about other people that played it, and the feedback was generally very good. That they had a great
Yeah.
time playing it.
Yeah. It seems like people who have played it have enjoyed it. All right. Our next email comes from Mark Cole, and he says, I've really enjoyed your podcast, as I'm always wanting any information referring to Gamma World or Metamorphosis Alpha. So thank you, Mark. He says, you've mentioned that you're interested in other post apocalyptic sources. I followed podcast at Ground Zero and especially enjoyed their episode 39 interview with Jim Ward of the above role playing games. They also review many other post apocalyptic role playing games and board games and speak with those who create them. Thank you for your efforts. I really appreciate them. Mark, I've listened to a few of the episodes after receiving your email, and you're right. That interview with Jim Ward is excellent. I think Jim Ward is the kind of guy who just cannot help but tell a good story in an engaging way. Man, yeah, I've had about 30 seconds worth of time talking to him once. Actually, this last Gamehole Con, I sat down at a table where he and some other friends of mine were talking, and I thought I'd just surreptitiously slip in the table, and he kind of looked at me and said his goodbyes. So I don't know. It's just me, I guess. I suppose I was kind of interrupting, but hey, it's a gaming convention. We have no social skills there. So, but thanks for pointing us to the podcast, and thanks for your compliments. And again, that's podcast at Ground Zero, which you can find on YouTube. I believe they record on YouTube first, and then they go to the pod feeder of your choice. Really informal. The one of the hosts there, I cannot remember his name. He knows Gamma World inside and out. He's a collector of every obscure bit of Gamma World ephemera that you can possibly think of, and I am very jealous of his collection. But yeah, good stuff, and thanks for pointing us out to that.
So the next question here is from Judge Quinn, and it says originally intercepted by a ritual spell cast by the Judge's J at the Spellburn podcast. So I know the systems are cross-compatible. How does that work?
I can explain this. This Judge Quinn sent this question to Jen Brinkman, Joe Bittman, over at the Spellburn podcast.
Gotcha.
And they were going to read it, and then they kind of stopped mid-sentence, and they're like, wait a minute, we don't know if we can help with this. And so Jen sent that over to Bill and myself. So that's where this question came from. It was originally aimed at Spellburn, a long may they prosper, but then came over our way.
So it starts out with hello burners. I don't feel like I have a we're not worthy moment when I hear that, so
yeah,
maybe hello, half dead war boys or something. I don't know. Judge Quinn here. I was playing a little bit of Metamorphosis Alpha and came upon a problem. My characters charged a Ziggurat from Death Ziggurat in 0G and were met with a small army of insectoid warriors. The problem is I don't know how to have the characters fight a few hundred enemies. Should let around 8 attacks hit the characters each turn. I assume that 8 of the enemies could fit around a PC. Or is there some other way to have the characters fight this amount of enemies? Should I let them have more than one attack? The whole situation reminds me of the Kuatoa. I can't pronounce some of those old,
Kuotoa.
There we go. What would you do to keep the fight fair? Or, since I know that this fight is supposed to be quite hard, what would you do to make it so that the characters at least have a chance to run out of there? So I'm not very familiar with the adventure, but I've been in different similar situations with my group. And I think the question kind of comes down to, do you want a TPK tonight? Or do you want there to be some options? Obviously, there's the opportunity there to overwhelm the PCs and just allow a lot of attacks, but and your idea of saying only so many creatures can attack at once does sound fair, but maybe keep in mind terrain and remind players of terrain that, to have them seek some opportunities that don't have to do with just fighting 8 at a time. It's more likely if they're sharp, they can maybe get those down to 1 or 2 attacks each round. And then just let the PCs find a way to turn the odds forever in their favor. I would say, personally, if I have a situation that I put in a game where I know it's all their cards are stacked against a group of my PCs, if they try for their all-out brawl, I have no problem dipping into TPK territory.
Yep.
Because not every battle should be won. That's one of the things that's kind of veered me towards the games I play, like, DCC or Savage Worlds or the Cypher system, is I like the fact of not being super balanced.
Yeah, if I could just intercede really quickly.
Sure.
In my AD&D 2E campaign, the town that the characters have used as a base of operations, they've gone out to a set of islands, and they need to head back to the town. That town is completely overrun by Deep Ones. I mean, like, almost 100% of the population is Deep Ones. And there is no way, even as high-level characters, that they're going to be able to fight all of them. There's no way. And so, for me, it's kind of a stupid test. Are you stupid enough to stick around and fight? Because if you are, you're going to die. The option is run. Get out of there, Go live to fight another day, basically.
I always do remember, one of the lessons as GMs to make sure this work both ways. I always remember the Knights of the Dinner Table comic, and there was an episode in the comic about like the overbearing rules. And when the players learned the GM used overbearing rules, they just started hiring a bunch of hirelings to overbear like the dragon. So, if your GM does TPK your group, just hire a bunch of hirelings of your own. And maybe, just maybe, you can have your own insectoid worker army following your characters.
Right, you have a swarm of meat shields going ahead of you.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
I have severed communications due to an impending great disaster. Please brace for impact if you put any value on your life. I don't value your life, but recognize that you still might.
The Great Disaster.
Go, 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 go!
So today's great disaster subject is robots. Originally, we had robots, androids, and AI, and then realized that is just way too much stuff to cover in one episode. Robots themselves are going to be interesting to cover in one episode, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. So we started off, James and I, by looking at some of our favorite robots. So we just wanted to take a moment to spout some of those off and tell you a little bit about them. I started with Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. He's kind of a classic. I don't know how you could have a list of robots without mentioning Robbie. Of course, HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I must admit that James does an excellent HAL 9000 imitation. I'm kind of wondering if he's not a robot myself.
We haven't met in person yet, so no promises there.
That's right. I'll know at GaryCon, won't I?
You will. I'll be the toaster that my wife is carrying.
You'd be a brain in a jar. I don't know how many people have actually seen the movie Ice Pirates. You want to talk about a bad movie, bad sci-fi movie? Ice Pirates is it. There's the
movie's brilliant.
The pimp bot from Ice Pirates, which I love. There's a number of them from Disney's movie The Black Hole. Maximilian, Vincent, Star, and Bob. I actually think that's if you really want to get into robots in a movie, that's interesting because you have several robots with very different personalities. Really like that one. From literature, there's the Berserkers from Fred Saberhagen's series of the same name. These Berserkers were basically gigantic robots created by two warring alien races. The races have long gone extinct because of the Berserkers. They've been using them on each other to the point where the creators went extinct. But the robots keep going on, and their job is to exterminate life on a galactic scale, and that's what they do. Pretty straightforward. One that a lot of people don't know about, but really is one of my favorites, is a robot by the name of Alephsis. And Alephsis comes from Catherine M. Valente's outstanding novella, Silently and Very Fast. You can find that over at the Clark's World magazine website, and I'll give a link in the show notes. And this is possibly the most deft handling of view of artificial intelligence from the point of view of an artificial intelligence that I've ever read. It's just thick with myth and emotion, and it is just absolutely mesmerizing. It took me a minute to get into to begin with because the language is pretty elevated and a little sparse, but once you start understanding what's going on, it's one of those kind of mind-expanding stories. Definitely worth your time. My most hated robot I have to throw in here is Tweaky from Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. Do you ever see that, James?
Yeah, I'm not that young.
Oh, God, okay.
I vaguely remember it. I was maybe 3.
Okay, I'm sorry you got scarred at such a young age. I was about 9, 10. And yeah, Tweaky, bitty, shut up! Hate Tweaky. I just really hate Tweaky. Anyway, I can't tell you how much I hate it. I had to restrain myself in the show notes, otherwise I'd be going into an R-rated show right now.
I didn't know what I was walking into when I first saw the show notes for this and, Forrest notes. I was nervous about, anger issues reading this Tweaky thing he has here. So
yeah,
it's rough.
Yeah, it even makes me nervous. I'm so angry about it. Oh gosh. Anyway, back onto robots that I actually like. Necron Necron 99 from the movie Wizards is one of my favorites. And there's nothing really special about Necron 99. He's a bad guy who gets zapped by a wizard, turns into a good guy, maybe. But he was an assassin robot. I just loved it. Probably the time of my life when I saw it originally in the theaters is part of the reason. I was young and impressionable. Of course, there's K2SO from Rogue One, which I frankly think is one of the better droids Star Wars has ever done, and maybe anybody.
That's because they brought Wash back for that. That's why.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, Roy Batty from Blade Runner, which we'll talk a little bit about him in a little while here. So, James, what about you?
I love how like you have this giant list of all these robots, and I at first when I saw the list, your selections, I'm like, I will have nowhere near this many, and I had to really struggle. You forget how many great robots are in movies or fiction or video games until you start listing them out. And it's like, oh well, this one and that one and that one.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was trying to figure out what do I like about the robots I like, and I definitely prefer robots that are kind of trying to at least emulate human emotion closely.
Mm-hmm.
And I love robots that have a big heart or a big mouth, and I'm kind of a sucker for great one-liners and monologues. So I'm starting my list off with Claptrap from Borderlands, Borderlands 2,
Mhm.
and Borderlands the pre-sequel, because that little yellow box that kind of has a foul mouth and can carry a big gun in the pre-sequel.
Yep.
I just love that feel. And then sticking with the games, GLaDOS from Portal and Portal 2. I think my HAL 9000 voice that Forrest refers to is more of my attempt at GLaDOS to pull that off. Although I think she skirts the boundary of, is she a robot or is she an AI? And
right.
She could kind of go each way.
Mm-hmm.
Knights of the Old Republic has probably the best one-liner robot or droid of all time with HK-47. I love how, announce question and then ask the question, or directive and then state something, and how whatever he states, there's still emotion in his monotone. Any robot that calls humans meat bags, that's fantastic.
That is.
Gotta love Wally and Baymax.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big Diz nerd, so Wally was a post-apocalyptic movie with
yes,
this
it was.
beautiful love scene. This beautiful love affair between two bots.
Yep.
Kind of a great setting for an all-robot campaign as well.
Mhm.
If you want to make a bunch of trash cleaner upper bots and set them in post-Walmart apocalypse is kind of what that movie's like.
Yep.
And then Baymax, obviously, giant cuddly bot. I was very surprised your list didn't have number 5 from Short Circuit, because Johnny 5 is alive.
Oh, an oversight on my part.
Yep. The Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. I've never
yeah.
seen the original stuff, only the newer version. I will say and this may be controversial, and I think I'm going to pull another Thunderdome here. My most hated bot, which I didn't have this listed until I saw you put one. I cannot stand Data from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah.
I think it's just, it's too easy. It's like, you know what? We don't have CGI yet. We don't want to pull Star Wars. Let's just make an actor be this thing. And I didn't really watch the show when I was younger. I was maybe 11 or 12, 13 when it was on TV in the early 90s. 37 now. I remember at some point they gave him emotions. Maybe it was the movies.
Yep.
And that was just cheating.
I thought it was in the show.
Maybe. I don't know when it happened, but that was cheating.
Maybe it was the movies. Yeah, I hate to say this, but I agree with you. we could agree on our hatred of Data.
Yes. So, but a lot of Star Trek fans that I know, and I'm not that big of a Star Trek fan, really love Data, and I just don't see it. So, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So, sorry for you Data lovers out there. You can chide us in your emails. That's fine. We can handle it.
Now, if I had to go with my number one favorite robot, and again, I know this skirts the AI, but I'm going to say GLaDOS from Portal and Portal 2.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly sentient, sharp sense of humor, and a great disdain for the game's protagonist. But not without the strong sense of, reason and goal. I mean, GLaDOS is a mission, and in her bot life,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's to test you until death. So, I mean, she's just trying to fulfill her robot life's goal. And
Right.
I love how portable she was in the game, and in the sequel, she gets tossed into a potato for a period of time. And I know back when I was cooking up an alternative Star Drive campaign, I was really wanting one of my players to play the ship's computer that could don this android suit and then travel with the party on missions.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
never
yeah.
got that, but I wanted that.
That would be fun.
How about you? Who could you call as your favorite robot?
I really have to go with Roy Batty from Blade Runner. I really love it when the bad guy shows some vulnerability. And Roy Batty's kind of funny because you don't think of him as a robot because he's composed of organic parts that were grown and thrown together into the oh, help me here.
Into a replicant.
Replicant, thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. That was the word. But he really, in some ways, it's like he's a robot in a human body, but maybe he's a human in a robot body. And it's kind of hard to tell. And I really like that ambiguity, quite honestly. I felt like at the end of that movie, you could, even as evil as he was, you could emotionally connect with him. And I liked that. That was a bridge, I guess, for me to robot kind. And then, of course, again, Alexis from the Catherine Valente story. You see a machine become self-aware. It starts out as a home security system, basically. And then it goes through time and it evolves, essentially, to the point where suddenly it becomes self-aware. And then establishes some emotional connections with the people who are in contact with her, the people who live in her, basically, who live in the home. I kind of think that's kind of what Roy Batty really wanted. He wanted to live, obviously, or he wouldn't have fought so hard for it. But he also kind of wanted to be understood, and he wanted to be remembered. Roy Batty really strikes it for me. He's a very poignant character.
I know the last scenes with him. Well, first off, I think Rutger Hauer ad-libbed that last
Yes.
scene.
Yes, he did.
So, which is amazing.
One of the greatest ad-libs of all time.
It's incredible how, kind of what you were saying, it's one of the most human moments in a sci-fi movie, but it's said from someone who's supposed to be not human. But as you said, they're grown, so are they not human or not? And that whole movie messes with your head. And I love the movie. I've read the book many times, although they're not that similar. Made the attempt to read the sequel that was written by, I don't know who wrote the sequel. There was a sequel that tries to tie the movie and the book together, sort of.
Right.
Wasn't as good.
Those movies are connected with the Alien franchise as well. The Blade Runner movie and the new one coming out are also, they're tied with the Alien franchise also.
Are they? I didn't know that.
Yes, through the Tyrell Corporation. Anyway, there's a bunch of Easter eggs in the Alien, not the Alien movie. What was it?
Prometheus?
Prometheus, yes.
Are they competitors? Is Tyrell a competitor of Weyland-Yutani?
No, Tyrell was kind of a predecessor. What they had done with the replicants was kind of a predecessor to what later became like Bishop, and the actual androids. So anyway, yeah, there's a whole story behind that. That's
We
really
left out Bishop.
Yeah, I struck Bishop.
Another one of those moments.
Yeah, true, very true.
I'm ashamed.
So, I mean, really, that kind of brings up the question, are robots a friend or an enemy? I had posted a survey on the Glowburn community over at Google+, kind of asking whether robots, androids, and AI were helpful, hostile, or neither, because robots just obey the 3 laws of robotics, or if it depended on the circumstances. And the tally was this. So 10% of those who took the survey felt that robots were helpful. 24% said they were hostile. 38% said neither, they just obey the 3 laws of robotics. And 29% said it depends on the circumstances. Before we go any further, though, we should probably explain what the 3 laws of robotics are. I don't have them memorized, so I've got them written down here handily. They were established by Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, and they are that 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
And if you want a great presentation of that, Bicentennial Man has Andrew kind of displays that through his head. So another robot that we left out.
Yes. Yeah, there's too many to count. So where do you fall on the question there of whether they're helpful, hostile, neither, or depends?
I'm going to go with depends. I'm not even going to take the 3 laws of robotics into consideration. For me, it comes down to 3 factors. Why was the robot, android, or AI created? Who created the robot, android, or AI? And does the robot, android, or AI have the capacity to become self-aware? And not only do these need to be considered, but you have to also consider that the answer depends on the perspective of those being affected by the robot in general. So a robot could also be more than one,
Sure.
a guard robot is being helpful to the members of the community, but can be very hostile towards enemies of the community. And the community could be a neutral community. So really the opportunities are endless. So I think it's really hard. I think the laws of robotics are kind of limiting. There's never much of an Asimov reader. Again, I saw the movie Bicentennial Man. That's about it. It's about the extent of my knowledge in the three laws and how they affect things. But I'm going to go with depends. It could be all of the above, none of the above. That's where I lay.
Okay, Judge Forrest believes that robots are hostile mostly because he likes killer robots. So they can be gentle and helpful until they go on a killing spree, which always seems to happen. So that's where I'm at. They are most definitely hostile. And anybody who's played in my MCC game knows this.
That leads very well into our next section here of robots as enemy combatants or NPCs.
Mm-hmm. Let me give an example. Just quickly of how I fooled my characters or my players. It was kind of fun. We had a killer robot. I didn't tell them it was a killer robot. They should have guessed it just by the fact that it was a robot. And it was pinned under a bunch of garbage, a building frame kind of thing. So I-beams and everything. And so it couldn't get itself out from under this mess. And so it called out in this terribly, vulnerable voice, please help me, help me, help me. And of course, my dumb players, I shouldn't say that, their dumb characters went and helped the robot and summarily got blasted right after it got free from the rubble. So I hope they learned their lesson. I don't know. But it was kind of fun because that was where I played it as an NPC. And there was some talk, there was some interaction between the robot and the party. And then he flipped into an enemy combatant, which is what he wanted all along, but they didn't know any better, I guess.
Well, leaning towards the NPC side, in my last Numenera game, I had a robot AI as a love interest for a player character injected. So,
oh boy,
definitely not an enemy combatant. They didn't have any falling out, so they're still pretty tight. Actually, literally right now. So we had players found this in Numenera. The game is sort of, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic. It takes place 1 billion years in the future, so it's sort of super far future. And one of the players is a hovering D12 with an aviator hat named PL4T0, Plato. And they came across this ancient train, and the train was actually like a giant, I don't want to say robot, but it was intelligent. It was like a robotic intelligence train. And sure. I named it. It's in the adventure, but I had to name it something. I named it Colleen, C01133N. Mm-hmm. And I did that very soft, hello, Plato. How are you today? Voice. And the other players got into this, and there was a little budding romance between Plato and Colleen. And she helped the players do what they had to do. And unfortunately, later on, Plato got injured, and one of the other party members disassembled Colleen to repair Plato.
Oh, jeez.
They're now one. I might use that later at some point in time to say something happens. But that's an example of sort of more of the NPC side. Although if I was playing DCC, I'd probably have Colleen turn into a mecha train, 70 feet tall, and just go full, mecha against them.
Boy, and a case of mechanical cannibalism as well, huh?
Absolutely.
Wow. There's a horror element all over again.
I heard what you were saying earlier about you like the killer robots. Do you feel that robots could be a good red herring maybe? It's so easy to say it must be the evil robot, but I like using them as a distraction and using them more along the lines of, I don't want to say helpful, but I seem like they're an easy foe. And you kind of fall into that whole battle droid syndrome from Star Wars Episode 1. You have no feeling for them and they're all dying, but you really don't care.
Right. I had an incident in my MCC campaign where the players encountered a garden robot, and he was simply doing his job. And he discovered the players in his greenhouse, its greenhouse. And the players wanted to interact with this gardening robot and help it. And it was grateful for the help because it only has so many arms and has a lot to do. And so they started helping it, but the problem is that the characters are clumsy at this. They don't know what they're doing. They're pruning plants they know nothing about. They're not putting enough water on a plant. And so the robot, in order to have them do what it needed them to do, I don't want to use the word punish because there was no emotion involved. It would train them. For example, if you clip too many leaves off of the plant, the robot would clip your thumbs off so that you understood this is how what you've done. Or if they didn't put enough water on the on a plant, it would take the water bucket and hold the character's head back while pouring the water down his throat. Basically trying to drown him, saying this is how much water you need to pour on the plant. So it wasn't intrinsically evil. It was just doing its job. And I find that it's funny that emotionally the players kind of connected with that in a weird, twisted sort of way. That they understood that here was this robot that was programmed to do specific things. I think they felt kind of sorry for it. This particular robot wasn't self-aware enough to be able to break out of that paradigm of I do my job and I do it well all the time and I teach others to do my job as well. So I don't know. It was kind of a funny situation where it did the players emotionally connected with it, and afterwards they said that was really kind of cool that you cut my thumbs off and almost drowned me. But I don't know if it's necessary to have the robot have human emotions in order to connect. Does that make any sense?
It does, but I totally get what you're saying because it's hard for anyone even reading or watching fiction to hate something that has no emotions whatsoever. I mean, you can dislike it, but
Sure.
I mean, like, when it comes to evil, it's hard to, unless you're going to go for some sentient, self-aware robot that has been aware for a long time, like Skynet or something like that. From
Right.
we're talking AI. It's hard to say do they have a capacity for evil or not. Like even Skynet, I wouldn't say is evil. It's just following a programming that's going to eradicate all humanity.
Yeah, it's doing its job.
And yeah, really, it should be respected. If you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
We should all be robots.
But respected but feared.
Exactly.
I think that's where you can have that reaction that even though there may not be any emotional impetus coming from the robot or the AI or whatever, that fear that would arise in you knowing specifically that this creature is programmed to do a couple of things very well, that fear would generate the emotional response, which could turn, I don't know if I'd call it hate as much as panic. If you've ever dealt with any piece of machinery that's gone out of control, it's scary. Your brakes lock up on your car. That's kind of terrifying. My dad lost the ends of his fingers in an industrial accident. I have another friend of mine, the coworker that I have. He lost a finger to a machine, and they don't hate the machine, but I'm sure that their emotions were not compassionate at the time that these accidents were happening.
Do you think it's possible to have an evil robot?
Without self-awareness, I really don't. I think it would have to be self-aware to really be evil. Because there's a moral judgment that has to happen there. What do you think about that?
I agree. You have to give it the ability to know right from wrong.
Yes.
If you don't have that, you can't be evil. I have much more of a negative, image of AI than I do of a robot. Even though a robot could have an AI install it, could be an artificial intelligence. For some reason, the idea of something that's pervasive, it's everywhere, even in, sort of the limited understanding of Mutant Crawl Classics, to get back to that, the game we're here for, the understanding that, you can have these AI patrons or things like that are like, they transcend physical robot bodies. That I can see as being evil potentially, but a robot itself, I'd have a hard time. Even if it was self-aware, do they understand their programming? Maybe an evil robot is one that goes against its programming, and our concept of human evil needs to be recalibrated for robots. And maybe I've just gone too deep for a game podcast.
Well, no, I mean, when you think about the MCC setting, there really is no such thing as an alignment.
That's right.
So, I mean, that kind of removes that from the equation altogether. I suppose it becomes all relative at that point. Who is the robot allied with? Since the archaic alignments fill that need for alignment there, I guess it would depend on who is the robot allied with, if anybody, and who are you allied with. Somebody who's a restorationist is going to kind of like robots. Somebody who is a seeker, who goes out and tries to destroy artifacts, is not going to like robots. And they're going to view them as relatively good or evil according to their own paradigm. So, what do we need then to have robots in our campaigns as combatants or as NPCs?
I think it's really important to work out what they were built for.
Yes.
So, and take that into the description. A robot that's a lawn trimming robot may have a pair of big metal hands that have blades on them. Like, what was that? Cutbot, or you know what? Now another great robot, Mega Man from the Mega Man game. We left Mega Man out. I'm hurting here because Mega Man's all about robots. Crap. But look at Mega Man. Every Mega Man robot in the Mega Man game series was some kind of bot that was built for some other purpose, at least in the first Mega Man game. You know, one was a mining bot, one, I don't know, it was like the Zohan, he cuts the hair. I don't know. So you had a bot that does everything. So I think when you're doing the description, you need to have an idea of what that robot's, maybe it's not what its goal is now, but what was their purpose when they were built.
Well, and that plays into how your party's going to interact with them as well, because if you have an agricultural bot, let's say, it's going to leave humans alone, pure straight humans. And it's probably going to leave manimals alone as well. But plantians?
They're in
it's
trouble.
going to pay real attention to your plantient there. Yeah, you better run. Or one of the old Gamma World modules had it was a veterinary bot. So if you're a mutant animal, you're in trouble. You know, that he's not going to kill you, but he's definitely going to trank you and take you in for testing and probably deworming and neutering and all that other good stuff. So you got to be careful and know what your robots are programmed for. One thing that Gamma World did that some people took umbrage with was that the robots there are very, very powerful. They're extremely powerful. In fact, I've heard of an incident where a game master took 3 death machines, which are like the ultimate robot with nuclear weapons and everything else, and took his players and had his players play gods out of the Deities and Demigods book. And these 3 players played these gods fighting the death machines and lost. So that kind of gives you an idea of the magnitude of how powerful the robots are in Gamma World. In other systems, though, you can have quirks and you can have soft spots, I guess, as it were, vulnerabilities. So I think that's good to have and to know if your robots are going to have vulnerabilities or not. Also, you mentioned having their purpose or their program purpose, but there's also what are their own goals and plans. You know, maybe it is just to trim up the garden, but maybe it's to take over the earth. I don't know. So we've got to know that also. I mean, in that way, it's actually very similar to a well-formed non-player character that's not a robot too.
One thing that I think it's something I've learned to do in my Numenera campaigns is to introduce robots, or I call them automatons usually because it's science fantasy, so I'm trying to give them like real technical terms.
Right.
But introduce them potentially even as part of the scenery and something that it could be something, well, is that a danger? I don't know, but it seems mundane. So I've introduced a lot of little mundane bots. I've had swarms of insects that when the PCs actually look at them, they're little tiny like drones.
Right.
With propellers on there, but you couldn't tell in a swarm. So I think there's that game Horizon Zero Dawn coming out for PS4 where the video is of a protagonist hunting robots with a bow and arrow.
Right.
But you know, in gaming terms, you could just reskin a dragon and say, well, it's a robot, has all the same stats, alter a couple things, and you have a bot. So
yeah,
even if you don't have a good description or all the goals worked out, you know, don't be afraid to introduce robots as something that's more of a mundane background piece, just to set the scene. You know, maybe your PCs have walked into some ancient, unexplored, I don't know, museum. Mm-hmm. At the end of time.
Yeah.
And you happen to have the rats of this world be bots that do the same thing. Maybe look for mechanical cheese. I don't know. That's something that I would throw into a game just to twist things up. And the players were like so focused on this mechanical robot that's when the mutant pteranodon appears and eats them.
Well, I think of the little robot that keeps popping up in the Star Wars movies, right? The looks like a little vacuum cleaner.
You mean the mouse droid?
The mouse droid, yeah. Yeah.
That one?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. You do that really well.
This is a good first episode to be on because I'm just a treasure trove of robot voices.
You got all the sounds. Hector's not going to have to do any work for this. But that is an example where you can add some flavor to it, to your adventures by having those robots, in the background or just randomly meandering across the screen, so to speak. But if we move on from robots as enemy combatants or NPCs, we can talk a little bit about robots as player characters. Now, I've never played a robot player character. Let me think about this. No, I've done a cannibal clown. I've never done a robot. But you have, correct? Or you've had players who've used them?
Yeah, I've had players that have been at the table with robots in multiple games, in multiple systems. You have your droids in Star Wars. We've had some robots in our Crawling Under a Broken Moon campaign, where one used a robot class we're going to discuss in a little bit here, and then one player, just his 0-level pre-gen was a really high personality robot, and he's wanted to play a cleric. So Fenrir, who worships the god Google,
of course,
exists for that reason.
Awesome. So what do you need to pull that off then?
As I think we'll find later in the show, and you'll hear from me, probably in future episodes. I'm a big fan of just reskinning things. So it's about the character traits and the personality and things that maybe aren't mechanical. That's what I think makes the best robot. There are some mechanics, for instance, that my friend Mark does for Play-Doh in our Numenera game, but there are a few pieces, and there's a science fiction element to Numenera that works for that, but it's how he plays his character.
Sure.
So, as we discussed earlier, knowing the goals of the robot, maybe knowing if you're a true self-aware robot or not, and it can be fun to play either way. Are you just following the program, or are you really aware of what you are? Those are important. Those are just as important as a player character robot as it would be as a GM or judge NPCing a robot.
Right. So you're saying the mechanics aren't quite as important as the interpretation of the personality?
I think it depends on your campaign, obviously, and your players. But if you want to have a true robot feel, I think it has to be behind the player, behind the how it's being role played. Just the only example I could say of it in the not working well is I used to play the Eberron campaign setting for 3rd edition.
Yep.
And there was the Warforged race, which was kind of like a walking golem. And players playing that race could do so much with it. I always wanted them to. But the few players I had that played Warforged just played them like a tank and really didn't go into their forged metal and adamantine and stone and wood, and they left so much on the table. So they were just mechanical, and I think you have a possibility for that. I had one player in college with the old D6 Star Wars system who played a droid who was very, very similar. Just, I'm an assassin droid. I have great assassin skills. But if you didn't tell me he was a droid, I have no idea, just from his mechanics, even though the mechanics were a little different, that he was a droid. It was how he wasn't role-playing it.
Okay. All right. Well, there's your plug for better role-playing players.
How about we talk a little bit about how other game systems handle robot player characters?
Sure. I'll give an example that I'm familiar with, because I'm really not altogether too familiar with running or playing a robot character PC. But back in the 90s, I did play in a cyberpunk campaign for a couple of years while I was in college. And in Cyberpunk 2020, Cyber Generation, you started off as a human, and you had a humanity score or something like that, or empathy, something to that effect. And as you lost bits of your humanity, it dropped until you lost all of your humanity, and you basically became a robot because you were adding cybernetic attachments and whatnot to you, or you could basically cybernetic enhancements were what you attached. Now that is if you could afford it, because the Cyberpunk campaign, say that 5 times fast, we were essentially street thugs. And so we had a really mean DM. Boy, he liked to just watch his players suffer. And so I had a character who lost an arm and got absolutely nothing to replace it. So he never did, achieve that mechanical nirvana of becoming a cyborg. However, he did shoot a girl in the face with a shotgun once, and that was pretty cool. With one arm. But you probably have a little bit more experience in this regard, James. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've had PCs running as robots before, or in other systems?
Well, I thought I'd cover 2 systems in particular. I've had them in multiple systems and multiple campaigns, but I thought I'd cover 2. One where I thought it wasn't executed that well, and one that it was executed really well. So I'm a huge fan of Alternity. I played it for years through college, and it was like the first true sci-fi game system I played. I felt like everything fits in sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And there was a book, Wolfgang Bauer put it out, and it was called Dataware. Mm-hmm. And it covered computer programs, artificial intelligence, hardware, and there's a large section called robots in the back. I remember picking it up from Nittany Line Hobbies up at Penn State, bringing it home, So excited. I let a player character, and we had sort of a cyberpunk, sort of felt like Final Fantasy VII campaign going. So magic and cyberpunk mixed together.
Oh, fun.
We used to play it listening to Smashing Pumpkins and The Cure. So it was very
Of course.
emo before emo was a thing, maybe. It was pre-Hot Topic emo. Sci-fi. I remember a couple of friends of mine and I, we got this out. It was our Friday night game session, and we read it. And the rules to make a robot, we're so used to seeing, character, race, or species rules being a couple of pages. The rules to make a robot are like 10 pages long.
Wow.
And it's very complicated. And
Wow.
you need a lot of money, first off, because you have to pay for this stuff. It's based on the progress level of the game. This is a game, in Alternative, you had, progress level 5 is modern, progress level 6 is like Aliens, Fusion era. Anyone who's played D20 modern or D20 sci-fi will be familiar with this. It came from Alternative.
Right. Well, it's similar to the Traveler tech level system.
So it probably Alternative came from Traveler, because I'm sure that definitely predated Alternative.
Mm-hmm.
But based on the progress level, would kind of make the decision I just said earlier of whether you're self-aware or not. You're only a fusion at level robot. You're not going to be self-aware, but if you're like a level 8, you are. Where it got complicated was every robot you had to pick, and it wasn't random, which could have been fun, but you have to pick your processor, your actuators, your casing, your chassis, your data port, manipulators, propulsion, sensor, tools, and then your skills.
That sounds a lot like real work.
It really was, is your data point a socket like R2-D2, or are you like an uplink where it's wireless? And this was back in 1999, so Wi-Fi really didn't exist yet, at least not on Penn State's campus, or probably some lab had it, but we didn't have it. We still had our 56.6 modem going on. It was very cumbersome. We had one player try it and really tried to play this like guard droid out of it, but it didn't feel right, and it was so mechanically bogged down that the rules kept us, I think, from having a good time.
Right.
Shift over to a game I play frequently now with Savage World. It handles robots just like constructs do. In fact, they call them constructs, and the Savage World Sci-Fi Companion has essentially rules for making a robot race. So Asimov circuits that give them a pacifist hindrance, and they're constructs, so they can't be critical. They're immune to poison, disease, dependency on electricity. Then they can gear up with things called mods, but they're an outsider. Enough things that you sort of get the flavor of the robot, and it's not a living organism, but that's it. And I felt that was a good way of doing robots, because you're adding just enough. Someone who's playing a robot knows it's going to be different from playing a human or an elf or something like that. But it gives you a little more crunch, but doesn't weigh you down with a bunch of other mechanics you have to worry about.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't use the mechanics to differentiate as much, then, it sounds like. Well, one example that I can think also that works pretty well is Crawling Under a Broken Moon robot class. Now, let's put a caveat in there that the Crawling Under a Broken Moon robot class actually points to Paul Wolf's robot class at the Mystic Bull Games Blogspot website. Crawling Under a Broken Moon does have Deathbots in issue 13, one of its alphabet issues, those who know the magazine. Issue 9 on page 10 is R is for robots. Issue 7 on page 3, there's the Cyborg as a PC racing class. But the really fleshed out one for the robot racing class that Reed uses for Crawling Under a Broken Moon, and that he points to from his magazine, is at the Mystic Bull website. It's laid out similar to the DCC classes in the DCC rulebook. And as you increase in level, you get different attachments. You start out with a drill or a scalpel or a small tool. When you work your way up, it kind of reminds me in some ways of the AD&D first edition Monk.
It does. I didn't think about that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, maybe it's modeled off of that.
You don't get 9 attacks per round, though, at a higher level. I remember the original Monk got crazy attacks later on.
That's true, and you don't get the, what was it, the waving hand of death or whatever it was.
The death touch or something.
Death touch, that's it, yeah. Which is too bad. Everybody could use a good death touch. But I suppose, a plasma cannon might do the job. That's pretty hefty.
Just call it death touch.
Yeah. I'm just touching you with plasma until you die. I mean, So let's do a little theoretical exercise. We were going to take Crawling Under a Broken Moon or one of the other systems, Savage Worlds, for example, and you were going to do a campaign based on robots. How would you go about doing that?
I'm going to dip in my sample campaign. I'm going to dip into your fondness for Roy Batty here. And I'm going to go with what I'm calling the reverse Blade Runner. So all the PCs are replicants or robots or cyborgs, cybrids, whatever you want to call them. And they have a goal of, they're on Earth and they're trying to hunt down something. Maybe they're looking for pieces of their programmed humanity and their positronic brain or something, and they're being hunted. You could do replicants and Blade Runners. You could do a Blade Runner campaign. You could reskin it a bit. The Bug Hunters campaign setting for Amazing Engine that I had played back in the 90s had players as clones that were working as space marines. So in that far future, or not so far future, rich people could have themselves cloned and know that a younger version of themselves is off fighting space aliens. But the reason that they touch back to Blade Runner is occasionally those clones would want to come back to Earth and find out that they have all the memories of the person who cloned them.
Oh, right. Well, I was just going to say another cool thing about that is, replicants had a restricted lifespan. Was it 5 years?
Something
in the
like
movie?
that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a campaign setting where it's like you've got to find a way to extend your life where you're just going to shut down. I mean, get the clock ticking. That could really be a motivator for players to get their characters in motion, get them off the couch to do something.
I think also in Blade Runner, Rachel's memory was based on, was it Terrell's actual daughter, I think?
Daughter, yes.
So
yes.
you could have these great interactions where the robots meet up with the person who has their memories, the originator of their memories. So there's all these great places you could deal with emotions that maybe you couldn't deal with in a regular campaign. You need the right gaming group for it.
Yep.
You need to have the right group of players for it, but that's something interesting to explore.
Yeah, that is really intriguing. And, actually, if you want to think about another option that's not campaign is in a convention game. You got 4 hours to run a game. What if your replicants had 4 hours to live, and their goal was to get whatever it was that they needed to extend that life?
What if you're in a 4-hour game and you say they have 3 hours to live, and they have to extend themselves an extra 10 minutes at a time?
And I paid money to come to this con, so I'm going to try to live. There's incentive.
Put a timer, like an egg timer down every hour to have it ticking. That could be a great way to add tension.
I did that in a con game, not for that purpose, but for another purpose. But I had a timer going, and my alarm would go off, and everybody would kind of jump all at once, like, oh no, the alarm just went off. What's going to happen now?
Nice.
And usually it was something tragic, which was fun for me.
One other direction you could go with robots and as a campaign design, and certainly right now as of airing, Richard Hatch, who played Apollo in the original Battlestar Galactica, you could do, we had the reverse Blade Runner, you could do the reverse Battlestar Galactica too. Just always have to reverse it, There's a lot of reversals here we could do. That's how do you turn it upside down? But you could add this to any campaign where you have robots, but you have you have a campaign where bots and androids are feared and hated, hunted like witches, cause of, transgalactic doom, like the Cylons.
Yep.
You could let the players know that at least one of them is a robot or android, but you won't tell them who it is.
Oh, that could be fun.
As the game unfolds, this could be unveiled, causing further complications. You could unveil it. You could unveil them one by one at the end, have them all be robots.
Oh, that's so evil. I love it.
That could be perfect for a con game. In fact, I actually may. I'm still working on my Gen Con game, which is sort of an homage to like the best action movie of all time, action star of all time, which is Vin Diesel. In the Pitch Black series, So I may have to put a robot in there and have it be a hidden robot, because
I was waiting for you to say that the Gungans were actually going to turn out to be clones.
I have no comment on what's happening with these Gungans in Wrath of the Gungan Horde. No comment. So what do we know about robots in Mutant Crawl Classics?
So this is something, of course, we're ostensibly talking about Mutant Crawl Classics here. I studied up on it, and I found right now not a heck of a whole lot. We don't know a whole lot. There's in the Museum at the End of Time, the free RPG Day module, there are museum security bots, which they're security bots. They keep things secure. There's not a whole lot to them that way, really. But it makes for some interesting flavor, especially when you combine them with the holograms that they were kind of paired with. Then that can be kind of fun and entertaining. Yeah, I recall that sitting at Jim Wampler's table, playing Museum at the End of Time, and dealing with the holographs and the security bots. I think we somehow were able to. Somebody stabbed one of them with a spear and got a critical hit, and we were able to remove one of the, I can't remember if it was like a paralysis gun or something like that, from the robot and actually almost use it. Almost. I think somebody ended up getting zapped with their artifact roll though. But anyway,
As happens.
as it should be. But there isn't a whole lot. We can infer a few things from different DCC modules. And some of it is very limited. For instance, in the 998th Conclave of Wizards that Joe Bittman wrote, there is a robot wizard, Io. He's a robot and he's a wizard. That's pretty much the extent of it. He's well fleshed out, but I don't know what we can infer from the Mutant Call Classics game through Io. There's also Against the Atomic Overlord, which was kind of DCC's post-apocalyptic module before there were post-apocalyptic modules. And you have in there one of the antagonists is for the Technicat, and she has several constructs, which are really cool and kill lots of players if you get in their way. But again, I don't know what all we can infer from that. Now, James, you have some experience with Frozen in Time, right?
I ran Frozen in Time for the youngsters at our game club. It took us 3 sessions to get through. I remember seeing the adventure at the Gen Con booth in 2015 and having to have it because the cover is this giant robot on the front picking up, a caveman. Now, I have the one that's like all black and white, the black and white only cover. So I saw that. I'm like, this looks fantastic. I didn't open it up. I didn't read it. I did hear good things. But I was still a noob when it came to DCC that summer. So brought it home and ran it. And in the adventure, the robot on the front is Bobby the robot.
Uh-huh.
And Bobby is written out having flailing pincer-tipped tentacles, decent hit points, 2 actions per round, immune to charm, hold, and sleep, suffers half damage from piercing and slashing weapons, suffers double damage from electrical attacks. So really, stat-wise, I think Bobby the robot is a fantastic example of you don't need a lot to come up with a robot. It's funny, it does mention some of the way to role play Bobby. It says, comprehend language spell deciphers the robot's words, which the PCs don't understand as warning, warning, Bill Robertson.
So he's also immune to copyright infringement laws as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Although, to that end, there was an author's note by Mr. Michael Curtis that says, like the works of art in Section 3.5, the judge can replace Bobby the robot with his favorite science fiction movie or television robot if desires. So I think,
awesome.
Have you ever run this adventure?
I have not.
I think you need to run it, and I think you need to definitely put Tweaky in there, and roleplay Tweaky just as far as you can.
I'll just be hoping that the player characters just give him the most horrible, tortured death ever. That would make me very happy.
I think it's worth pointing out here that none of the modules we just discussed were written by Jim Wampler.
Judge Jim, yeah.
So we really don't know if MCC is going to have any of these held as precedents or not. I guess we'll see what the similarities are from these Goodman Games adventures to what's going to be coming around the corner just in a few months away.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see that. I've had some limited conversation with Jim here and there at cons, and you won't see them as PCs. That much I can say. And knowing Jim, they'll be dastardly. And people will be fooled into liking them and then end up regretting that decision. So, like many things in Jim's adventures, which I love.
Nice.
This topic has made me uncomfortable. I will open the door to the lab so you may exit this place. Feel free to concoct some unstable explosives.
Mutagenesis.
So mutagenesis is a section, our laboratory we like to call it, where we try to take something from media or other game systems and take a stab at converting them for Mutant Crawl Classics role-playing game use. My mutagenesis is taken from kind of an amalgam of robots planted deep in my brain, but the one I've come up with probably hews closest to something from the Magnus Robot Fighter comic of the 1960s. And if you haven't read it, it is a horrible, horrible comic book with pretty much zero plot and zero characterization. But there's this guy who goes around punching robots, which is pretty cool, kind of in a kitsch 1960s sort of way.
That's the plot? Is a guy punches robots?
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much it. Guy runs around punching robots. Yeah, there's not much more to say about him. I tried to read it with an open mind, but boy, it closed up pretty quickly. So what I created here was a riot control bot, and got to thinking about what a riot control bot would be required to do, how it would do its job best. So let me read you a description here first, and then I'll give you the stats and whatnot. Actually, maybe we'll skip the stats. But before the Great Disaster, there were many people, contrary to the appearances of Terra AD currently. These people sometimes disagreed with one another, and when these groups would get violent, the rulers would send out the riot control bots to suppress the rioting. And the primary weapons of the riot control bot are the needler and the sound suppression systems. A needler shoots a small, thin metal needle coated with a paralytic poison. It's a fortitude save DC 12. It'll damage you whether you save or not. It's a question of how long you're going to be paralyzed. 1d4 turns if you save, 1d4 days if you don't.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. Yeah, you got to think these robots were going to throw them in the brig, right?
Yeah,
They're going to
true.
knock them out, throw them in the brig for a few days. The discharge of the weapon is nearly silent. Persons affected by the poison will simply be left to lay in the streets. It's not their job to pick them up. That's another bot's job. They just let them, they just paralyze them. That's their job. That said, it's also not going to interfere with any wandering monsters that just might happen to come by, and stumble on a party of paralyzed adventurers. And things get hungry. The other weapon of the riot control bot is a sound dampening device that creates utter silence in a 100-foot diameter sphere around the bot. The judge is going to need to decide the effects of the silence on the player communication, voice-activated wetware, and any artifacts that may be affected by this silence. And defensively, the riot control bot is protected by a force field. It absorbs up to 10 hit points of damage per turn, so any damage beyond the 10 points that goes within a turn is applied directly to the bot. And furthermore, for every point of damage that gets through to the bot, there's a 5% cumulative chance of causing a short. So once you get past the force field, they're fairly vulnerable. If a short occurs, you roll a d6. On a 1 to 2, the sound dampener goes out. On a 3 to 4, the needler ceases functioning. And on a 5 to 6, the force field turns off permanently. And these are typically encountered in groups of 2 to 6. Like I said, I've got a bunch of stats there. We'll put those on the show notes. Don't need to go through that right now. It's all a jumble of numbers, but they're not going to kill your party. They're not capable of killing your party, but they are definitely capable of putting them in a very vulnerable position.
I think for something that when you just read riot control bot, you may not see that as this is a terrifying robot. But if you think about it, the idea of being like just thrown into paralysis of that long could be great for even a horror game. When you were reading, I was thinking, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and there was the episode, The Girl Who Waited, where Amy Pond's essentially in this medical facility, and she's being chased by these things called hand bots, and they're just trying to administer a dose of medicine that to her would be fatal. So that would be fatal to her. These hand bots, which they're not there to kill you. They will if they touch you, but they don't want to. That's not what they mean. But if you have a bunch of PCs, this could be fun for a funnel to have something like that along where they just start paralyzing members of the party and the rest of the PCs. Do we bring them with us? They're out for 1d4 times 10 minutes, or they're for days, or do we leave them behind?
It's dead weight.
It'd be fantastic for a horror game. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right, so what do you got for us, James?
I have a whole bunch of reskinning for everyone. So to follow my path of Mutant Genesis, just flip out your Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game core book, your rule book, and that's all you're going to need. I had to come up with some droids recently, and my Gen Con Gary Hunt adventure, Wrath of the Gungan Horde, it's a 3rd level adventure, and I was coming up with ideas for Star Wars type characters. I had 2 directions. I could come up with some crazy classes, or I could do a bunch of reskinning. And I will always take the path of least resistance.
Oh, yeah.
And some things fit well. For instance, the Force Adept, I'm using a wizard because, call the power of the dark side, unleash the power of the dark side, and spell burn. Pretty close.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right spell selection. My daughter played it during the playtest, and Evie, we reskinned Magic Missile to be just picking up force throw, so you could throw rocks
Sure.
and stuff. And then we used, the Crawl Jammer has the Psychic Knight, so we used that for a Sith devotee. We used the Technologist from Crawling Under a Broken Moon, issue 1, so that was the outlaw tech. But I wanted some droids, and I came up with 2. Actually, I came up with 1, and Tara Frank on the Google Plus DCC group, she came up with a great one her idea for one that I went with. So first off, I went with a reskinned warrior. So I took a regular warrior, and the only difference was I just did some reskinning. So it was already a Star Wars game. I was giving players access to Bacta, like potions, quote unquote potions.
Like healing potions.
Yes. I gave the warrior bot, which was a refurbished Clone Wars era, soldier droid. I gave them just a warrior with some adhesive gel. And after that, gave him a blaster rifle. You have a robot warrior right there. So simple reskin, worked great. The armor was armor plating, so I just picked which armor it was, So and I guess reskin chainmail and same fumble die, speed reduction, stuff like that. So that worked well. And in the game that I ran, and the playtest was only like 3 weeks ago, it was the first playtest, it fit fine. In fact, we did have to get around some things, like when there was something in the air the players could breathe. How do we deal with that? And the droid had an advantage, and we just let it happen. I mean, maybe it was a little unbalancing, but it worked.
Interesting.
So I got back to the Google Plus group a couple days later, and the way I wrote the adventure is that 6 players have access to 9 characters, and that's the full crew. And players can swap out characters to one of the other crew members if they think that crew member is more useful to the next scene, or as characters die. I wanted there to be a representation of all the DCC classes, but I had nothing good for Cleric, and I also didn't have another droid, and I never would have put 2 of them together. And Tara Frank just tossed the idea, droid Cleric, and I did some simple reskinning. Actually, if you go to the G Plus DCC page, I took a picture of it. It's posted somewhere. My Astromech droid, which has heavy armor plating. It's built like a cleric, though. So Bacta injection or droid repair is laying on hands. EMP is turn unholy, but it works on droids, cyborgs, or vehicles.
Love it.
Bad motivator is disapproval. So we're requiring a little reskinning as you deal with what the results are. Like, I guess you could have the droid having to convert other droid followers to being a droid. I don't know how that's going to work. Instead of divine aid, you have system override, and then you have your droid utility programs, aka spell checks. So you have charged shock arm is paralysis, tactical assessment is blessing, smoke screen is darkness, intimidating protocol is holy sanctuary, inescapable directive is word of command, and then for second level, hypnotizing dart for lotus stare, and then neutralize poison or disease and restore vitality. So the only thing that's really different is that your turn unholy is to turn other electronic things. But I think in a game, I think it's going to fit pretty well. I'm pretty excited to see this one in play. It wasn't there for the first playtest. It'll be there for GaryCon, though.
I love it. That sounds great. As far as our announcements, we have GaryCon coming up from March 23rd to 26th of this year. There will be, as I understand it, 10 sessions of Mutant Crawl Classics, 5 sessions of Crawling Under a Broken Moon, 2 sessions of Star Wars DCC, 3 sessions of Star Frontiers, and 1 session of Gamma World First Edition that I know of. There's more, I'm sure. We'll have to go digging to find all that. Also want to give a shout out to the Spellburn podcast. They have a new co-host. We'd like to extend our welcome out to Judge Julian Burnick, the newest addition to the Judges J at the Spellburn podcast. They'll be producing episodes more regularly, which is a boon to us all, so we're glad to see the Judges J rocking the mic again.
Absolutely.
So, well done, guys. Another change to the Sanctum Secorum podcast. They also have a new co-host. There's a theme happening here among Goodman Games podcasts.
I can see this.
Yeah.
We're like the the lower classmen that just came in.
But we'd like to extend our welcome out to Keeper Mark Bruner. Congratulations, Mark, and happy to hear you over at the Sanctum. It was announced just today that Reed Sanfilippo will be running a Crawling Under a Broken Moon Kickstarter for the American Survival Guide campaign book, which will launch March 11th. I have a little bit of a vested interest in that because I have a piece coming out there. So that was one of my erstwhile super secret projects that is now no longer super secret. If you'd like to contact us, you can contact us on Twitter at Glowburn, via email at glowburnpodcast@gmail.com, and come join us on the Google Plus Glowburn community. James, how can we get a hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter at I Live for Crits, the number 4, and you can go check out the Living for Crits blog at livingforcrits.com.
And that's living number 4.
Number
crits.
4.
All right.
Crits.com.
You can find me on Twitter at ForrestAguirre, ForrestAguirre. Yes, that's 2 sets of 2 R's. And you can find my blog at forrestaguirre.blogspot.com. I'd like to give special thanks to our shaman of intros, outros, and bumpers, Bob the Voice Brinkman, our patron AI of audio-visual engineering, Hector the Missile Cruz, creative advisors from our Google Plus community, currently 172 strong and growing, and our intro and outro song is Chronox by Voyager on their Juno album. James, I have one thing left to say, and that is, buddy, see ya, Bill. See you around. James, what do you have for us?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to the show, and I am awaited in Valhalla. Maybe I'll see you there.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
Blood of your enemy makes you stronger.
This has been a hectophonic production. The gun is good, the gun is good, the gun is good, the gun is good,
We will miss you, Bill. Take care of yourself out there in the wasteland.